Hey there, and welcome to the Mugcast, a cozy listen to pair with your coffee. I'm Hug in a Mug, a writer on Medium, and I cover everything from travel and study abroad to music, psychology, and feminism. Every week, I read one of my stories aloud with some new reflections and insights and background stories. So grab your mug, settle in, and let's get into today's piece. For today, the second episode, I've chosen a piece that is very dear to my heart. It's a story I've been meaning to write probably since the very start of writing on Medium. Imagine this. You've been looking for a way to go abroad for years, and you were looking for all kinds of places in Asia. Suddenly, in March, you discovered this country called Taiwan. You find it in March. You apply to this university in April. You get your feedback in early June. You accept the university and get your visa in June. And then in August, you take the airplane and simply move your whole life to a country that you had less than 6 months before never heard of. Retrospectively, this is really funny because for the longest time that I did live in Taiwan, I didn't want to tell people that. I wanted to give people the feeling, I wanted to give Taiwanese the impression that a lot of foreigners were purposefully coming to Taiwan, and I wanted to give them the impression that specifically I had chosen Taiwan on purpose, that it wasn't a coincidence. I wanted to show them the appreciation that I have for the country. Was my basic thing in Taiwan. I wanted to really immerse myself. I wanted to give thanks to the people that I was being hosted by, the country that I was living in. I never really expressed or truly expressed the extent of a coincidence that me landing in Taiwan had been. But if I talk to a lot of foreigners, the story is kind of repeating itself, where people are landing in Taiwan by mere coincidence because it's not very common to go there. It's not a common place for holidays. It's not a very common place for language exchange. Most people who look into this kind of direction, or most Europeans, Westerners who are going to Asia, are looking for Korean exchange or looking for Japanese. And if they're looking for Chinese, they're probably going to go to China, right? So very, very few people actually end up in Taiwan. The point I'm trying to make is it was a coincidence that I found out about Taiwan. And I'm not going to lie to you, I was scared as fuck. I was scared as fuck to move my whole life across the planet. I had trouble packing my whole life into 2 large suitcases. So long story short, I was not well prepared language-wise and culture-wise. I tried to do what I could, but some part of me was really proud of going to some place where nobody else had been. It really seemed like a kind of discovery type of spirit. Upon arriving in Taiwan, I discovered that I needed a new creative outlet, and because things were already so new and my whole life had been turned upside down, and I was trying to learn this language, Chinese, that I could barely grasp, I was like, why not add another thing? Why not try to be bad at something else, and that would be writing? So I think the fact that I moved across the globe made me bad at so many things simultaneously that somehow my hurdle to starting writing was lowered because I was already bad at understanding the culture. I was bad at speaking Chinese. I was bad at doing my university things the right way. I was bad at even managing my documentation because I had to get, I had to get insurances. I had to get public transport and all of those like itty bitty, a bank account, a phone bill. I had to get everything aligned for a whole new life. And at all of these things that I was encountering, I basically sucked at. All of these things, all of these small little matters that were suddenly thrown at me, I was not good at. So at the time, I think the bar of entry for writing was just naturally lowered. And so one day in November, I just decided to start writing on Medium. And the initial idea was to write about Taiwan. Because to be honest, my field of proficiency after 2 years should probably be writing about study abroad, writing about Taiwan, right? And I didn't start writing about Taiwan for a long, long time. I did write a few articles here and there that kind of referenced it. Didn't really realize how those were probably some of my best articles. I'm only really seeing that now. But just before I was going to leave in May, I decided to write another article about Taiwan, and it was impromptu. I was just sitting in a cafe in a park called Central Park in my city. My home city was Kaohsiung. This area around Central Park, Kaohsiung, has a few nice cafes, and one is right inside the park. And I was just watching like everybody doing their life, basically, all of the small things that they do, and I had to smile at it because at that time I was going to leave in about a month or two, and I'd stayed in Taiwan for 2 years and I was getting nostalgic about the place. And I just decided that I would, instead of reading a book, which I failed to do because there were too many people, too many voices, too many things around, I decided I would just sit down in that cafe and write an impromptu story. Like, just sit down and flush out all of the information, things that I saw, all of the perceptions I had in that moment through my keyboard, through my fingers, right onto the Medium website. It turned out not bad. I loved it. I'm not going to lie. I loved the process of writing it. I loved when I was editing it. I felt that I had done a good job, but I didn't expect much. Suddenly, a few days later, this very same article gets boosted. And that's a big thing for me because articles of mine don't often get boosted. And this one specifically was just self-published in my own little mini publication that I have for my travel things. It wasn't easy to find. Let's just say it that way. It wasn't an easy find. And it certainly is a very niche topic. People actually validated my experience in Taiwan, even though I'm not Taiwanese. And so this article really is very dear to me. It has a long, long history of me trying to fit in Taiwan. It's basically the cherry on top of a 2-year experience of me living abroad and always fearing that I didn't know enough yet. I think the main reason I pushed out writing about Taiwan in specific was that I never felt qualified enough. I never felt that I knew enough. I always felt that somebody else would know more. That's the background story for the Taiwan article. I'm already noticing this episode is going to be way longer because it's just a very, very dear to my heart article. And the title of the article is Welcome to Taiwan, a Day in Whimsical Formosa. What makes Taiwan weird but wonderful. To sum this article up, it is basically a little story. It's supposed to guide you through one day in a Taiwanese city in Kaohsiung in the middle of Central Park. So the idea is that you can pick up your coffee and get ready, settle in, get yourself comfortable, lean back, close your eyes, have a few sips whenever you need to, and listen yourself into a new place. Basically, the idea is to travel abroad with this article. I really wanted to create an immersive piece that you could listen to where you would feel like you're sitting in Taiwan. No matter if you're going to go to Taiwan soon and you just want to prepare yourself, or if you've never been, I want this to be like a little day trip to Taiwan. So lean back and enjoy the ride. Welcome to Taiwan, a day in Whimsical Formosa. What makes Taiwan weird but wonderful? As my 2-year stay in Taiwan draws to a close, I can't help but reflect on my time here with one crying and one smiling eye, as we say in German. Admittedly, the time here has been some of the best in my entire life, without any exaggeration. And though I'm hoping there are more countries like Taiwan out there, I have a hard time parting ways with this whimsical place. Though not commonly on the list of top places to visit in Asia, this island has everything you need for an enchanting holiday. Dreamy ocean views, buzzing cities, crazy foods, enchanting nature, and just enough exotic flair to catch your eye. And then there is the best thing about Taiwan, the people. There is no other country in the world where I've fallen in love with the general population as much as I have here. The feeling of safety and warmth spread by the locals is mesmerizing. It puts me at ease and makes this the perfect place to kickstart my life as an international. But no culture is for everyone, and I certainly don't love everything about this country either. It would be boring if I did, right? So here is a little snapshot of what Taiwan is like on a day-to-day basis. The example I'll be using is a typical day in a park in Kaohsiung, the southern metropolis of this island. Close your eyes if you can and want to activate the audio function or listening in as a podcast, and imagine your day in Taiwan. Early bird catches the breakfast. If you happen to observe the early morning hours in a park or neighborhood in Taiwan, you will notice that the day may start rather early. Sometimes at 5 a.m. in the morning, yellow and red little stores open their gates, steaming with buns and inexplicable rice things in all sorts, colors, and shapes, usually in really cute little ovens that I just adore. Breakfast stores, 早餐店, are a common sight in Taiwan and typically open in the early morning until lunchtime, and sometimes also late at night. They offer typical snacks like baozi. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry, my Chinese gets so much worse when I have to speak a whole sentence in English and then add small little Chinese words. Please excuse it. A fist-sized steamed bun with a variety of savory and sweet fillings, and danbing, a pancake, sometimes soft, sometimes crunchy, filled with eggs, meats, or greens, and dumplings, and all sorts of rice or soups. Don't let the simple look of foods fool you. This country is all about flavors, not so much about plating, and also not so much about the beauty of the store itself, because these stores will sometimes look like not much. The food is really good. It's not too spicy, which is kind of rare in Asia, I feel like. I really like that they use spices, but not too many, and I think the natural flavor of specifically the greens and the veggies really gets to shine. They have a really good way of working with rice doughs too, so like I'm a big fan. Breakfast shops are the morning hub where workers on their way to the harbor, office, or any other occupation silence the hunger that overcomes them after lifting their heads off the pillow. You will hear, if you can comprehend, different languages in a mix, mostly Mandarin with the common occurrence of Taiwanese local words. At the same time, elderly might exclusively talk in Taiwanese, a completely distinct language, and if you're lucky and happen to be located in certain regions, you might even catch some Hakka or indigenous languages. While you walk to the park, sipping on your coffee, you will find that though coffee is becoming its own sort of art in Taiwan, most people love to indulge in a cup of iced tea. Red, in English black tea, hong cha, or green tea, lu cha, and especially the praised oolong cha, oolong tea, with soy milk, or what Taiwanese lovingly call real milk, are common sight at breakfast stores. But let's not forget the god of liquid indulgences that the Taiwanese drink scene has to offer. Milky bubble tea, or zhenjiu naicha. You would surely be in need of an appointment with the ophthalmologist if you missed the vast number of drink shops along the streets. If there is one thing that is the pride of Taiwan, it must be their bubbles and fruit teas. I honestly recommend the fruit teas over the bubbles, but do as you please. And I am using a plural for a reason here, because the choice of drinks is endless. Most young people hurry to windows offering all kinds of teas ranging from the classic blue and yellow 50 lan or 50 lan to the more pricey maku or kebuka or kebuka, which is like a Japanese type. More milky options like milk sha. My personal favorite is milk sha is the mulberry tea. My goodness, that's delicious. And the very questionably labeled tea magic hand. I once ordered a drink called Passion is Not Just a Fruit from the said tea magic hand store with a guy in my company. The said individual did not have the decency to translate my very questionable choice of drink, because ordering Passion is Not Just a Fruit for takeout to take to a guy's house is kind of, well. However, his female friend had the greatest joy in letting me know exactly why he had been chuckling as I commented on my passionate love for said drink. So the occurrence was that, and this is very common in Taiwan, you will try your very best to speak Chinese, but of course you will fuck up, because there is no way you will just be able to say it normally. Like, there is no way in hell you will be right if you're speaking Chinese. Like, everybody will have their merry time listening to your bullshit. Because Taiwanese are the kindest people on the planet, they will just smile, laugh, wink, or try to not react at all. Depending on the size of the mistake that you just caused, they might want to help. And so a lot of people will try to teach you Chinese words, but they are not always the most useful words. And also, there is no way to remember them. It's just so amazingly hard to remember the words that are all so similar sounding. Chinese is known for having a heavy load of homophones. You're supposed to remember all these things. Nobody writes them down. If they write it down for you, likely they'll type it out in their own script, which Taiwanese don't even use pinyin. Taiwanese typically use zhuyin, a different type of phonetic spelling. I mean, this is going too far, but basically, even if they spell it out for you, you will likely not be able to read it. So the tricky thing about Chinese is people will be trying to help you. People will try to make you learn it, but they might not be able to actually give you the help that you need to learn the language, because even if they write it for you, even if they write it down for you or type it out on your phone, 90% of the time, you cannot read it. You have never seen these characters before. You have never comprehended the meaning or pronunciation of these characters. This is not the time and place to dive into the complexities of the Chinese language, but let me tell you that coming to Taiwan with zero Chinese, I'm struggling to not say it's dumb. I'm trying to find a nicer word than it's incredibly stupid, because I don't want to label my experience as stupid, but it was. I think it's incredibly naive to go to Taiwan without Chinese, and it's incredibly brave. Let's just put it in the category of a naive and brave thing to do. You will not understand a thing. And if you live in Taipei, everything's gonna be fine. People speak proper English, and in Taipei, you will be able to live a good life with just English. But don't go away. If you want to go somewhere else, you will need Chinese. And if you ever want to feel like you actually have a place in this country and society, you will need the language. And that's not a mean thing to do of the Taiwanese. That's a basic requirement if you move to a different country. If you want to live somewhere, you'd better speak their national language, of course. I will be complaining about Chinese more. I'm constantly complaining about Chinese, but I'm not complaining because I don't love the language. I find it mesmerizing in how beautiful it sounds. I truly find it sounds very beautiful. I love how it looks. I admire the complexity of it. And it's such a beautiful thing to learn, because you really feel like you're unlocking a part of your brain that you've never encountered before. I literally unlocked a different personality inside of myself by learning this language. And I understand so much more about the world by viewing it from this angle. But after 2 years of learning Chinese, I still feel like the biggest Dumbo walking down the street. I literally get scared before I have to place a simple order. 7-Eleven challenges me if they ask me weird things. Even though I'm complaining about Chinese sometimes, that doesn't mean that I just dislike it. I love it. I really love it. I enjoy it so much, and I've reached the level where I can sometimes explain things for myself. Like, I can explain where things are coming from because I've seen this character somewhere else, or I've heard that pronunciation somewhere. But to reach that point was not fun, and it will continue to not be fun because you will be embarrassing yourself the whole time. Chinese is a language to lower your self-esteem. If you want a really effective buffer on your self-esteem, if you would like to learn to be humble, learn Chinese. Truly. There's no better advice that I can give somebody who's got too high of an opinion of themselves than to start learning Chinese and try to talk to people. It is amazing how dumb you will feel all of a sudden. Long story short, I do complain about Chinese in the most loving way because I love it and I enjoy it so much, and now I find it sounds really beautiful. I love Taiwanese music, for instance, because I love how the language sounds when you sing it, but that's another time. Just know that Chinese is not easy. Work, school, and traffic. As you arrive at the park, you will see several interesting groups of individuals: children, adults, the elderly, and dogs. Sounds normal, but here's where Taiwan gets a little bit quirky. Children at this time of day, mostly on their way to school, are usually wearing uniforms. Each school has a little bit of variety here in terms of colors and cuts. They walk quickly, purposefully, and hurriedly. Their little voices are loud and tumble over one another as they discuss the latest happenings. Those who live further from school will be brought to the school gate by their parents on a scooter, each with an ill-fitted helmet and a questionable transportation technique. I've seen children with and without helmets clinging to their parents on a quickly moving vehicle as their legs dangle uncontrollably off the sides of their scooters. Smaller ones are at least strapped to their mothers' bodies, sometimes with their backs to the traffic, sometimes in an awkward face-first position. Mostly, they are wearing masks, which are often better adapted to their needs than the bike helmets that they're wearing on their heads. Seriously, as an adult, I wouldn't dare put such a thing on me and call it safe. On other occasions, the children will just be standing on the footrest of the scooter, utterly unattached to their parents, just holding onto the steering handles of the scooter. My worst sightings have been plastic chairs strapped to the footrest and children just sitting on them as if they were chilling on their couch. There have been many instantaneous heart attacks upon seeing such careless child positioning. The one thing about Taiwan that I truly dislike is how they transport their children. This has to do with the fact that I'm working with kids though. So bear in mind as I talk about kids that I'm very opinionated on how kids are raised. I'm dreadfully opinionated on how parents and kids interact because my job was to advise families on parent-child interaction. I know people from the West love to stereotype Asian education and Asian childhood. And some of it is true and some of it is not. And this is too long of a discussion to be had now. Just bear in mind that I have a bit of a specific angle for childhood safety and The problem with this lack of safety measures is that Taiwan traffic, in general, seems to be one of the worst ones in East Asia. A friend once told me that Taiwan is the only developed country where traffic accident-related death rates exceed those of heart attacks, and I am inclined to believe him. On a regular basis, I cycle down the streets and bear witness to another accident. I wish I were joking. Thus, if you're trying to walk to the park, you will also be accompanied by the rhythmic sound of scooters roaring down the street according to the green light switch. If there's one thing that is for certain in Taiwan, it must be that there is never a moment of silence. People in Taiwan have a generally higher ability to tolerate noise. Like, noise in Taiwan is on a different level, and every time I arrive home, my ears are ringing. I'm not joking. Every time I arrive after the airplane, I mean, it has to do with the airplane noise, of course, but every year that I return home, I discover how silent my home is and how abundantly small and cute the sounds of the birds here are, as opposed to the birds in Taiwan and the scooters in Taiwan and the firecrackers of temples. Like, I'm not joking, no day is a bad day for a firework in Taiwan. Like, I'm not joking. To live next to a temple means to observe a lot of noise. This sounds like I'm complaining about the noise, but it just is Taiwan, you know? This is something that is nostalgic to me. The sound of a Taiwanese temple has a sort of nostalgia to it. Yes, of course, if you live next to the temple every day, and I did have that for half a year, it sucks. Every day in the morning, you hear sounds. Every day at night, you hear sounds. There's people babbling because they're sitting in front of the temple talking to one another, and they don't talk in a low tone of voice. You have no idea or control over when these people are going to find a way to celebrate. And they will block streets to celebrate. They will host parties. They will turn on speakers. They will light fireworks in a really narrow alleyway. They have no fear of lighting fireworks whenever and wherever it pleases them. Or it pleases the god, I guess. But just know that all of the things that I'm listing here are more like a nostalgic feeling, because that just all is Taiwan in the best and worst way possible. Every country has these things that are good and bad. Sometimes by winking at the quote unquote bad things, you just find like the soul of the country. And part of the soul of Taiwan is that there's always something going on. And these things don't perfectly make sense to a Westerner most of the time, but that's the charm of it. That's how and why it is beautiful to be there, is because it's so different. And in being different, it is so welcoming. As the students reach their classes and the school bells chime in the cutest of melodies, parents begin to reach their workplaces to indulge themselves in another day of overworking. The work culture in Taiwan rivals that of Japan and Korea in terms of business and exploitativeness, with the added bonus of comparatively low pay. Yay! You would assume that the parks are empty now that everyone is at work, but now is when a special part of the Taiwanese population gets their time to shine: the elderly. Old as gold. They're everywhere, all the time. They do what they want, and everyone lets them. They turn right when you least expect it, and they are loud and vocal about whatever you don't need to hear. In Gen Z lingo, they have the risk that a lot of younger Taiwanese lack. The elderly are the last cry of YOLO. Upon entering a park, you will encounter the clicking sounds of mahjong stones on makeshift wooden boards, circled by plastic chairs that look like they were made to be single-use. Believe it or not, some elderly men sit in these raspy chairs every day, likely for years and years. Some gamble, others don't. Some play Go or Weiqi, others play Chinese chess. There really seems to be no excuse for a Taiwanese grandpa to miss out on board games. These old men are so common. I was living next to a baseball court, and there was a group of old men every morning there. And every morning they would sit underneath a tree and have the sport, and I would cycle past them, and it would click, 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 click. The whole time I would hear their stones clicking into place and them saying, you know, the words that you use for playing mahjong anyway. And it was so cute because in the evening when I came home, they had hung those same plastic chairs inside the tree. And I don't know, like, these men were not tall. These were like old grandpas with like bent backs, and they managed to every day lift their plastic chairs into the tree, which was probably like at least 2 meters tall, and then hang the chairs up there just so nobody would take them. Like, I don't, to this day, I don't question exactly why they did it, because one of the things that you learn as you live in Taiwan is you stop questioning everything. Things happen, and there's so many questions to be had when you arrive, but not everything needs an answer. The one thing I really learned at the end was to smile at the fact that I didn't need to have an answer for everything. things just happened. And these grandpas hanging their plastic chairs in the tree was one of those things that just happened. Elderly ladies will be walking around ferociously, cleaning the common areas or hurriedly assembling large mountains of trash bags for the trash car to pick up. You might think they are sweating to death, as every nook and cranny of their bodies is shaded by weird assemblies of clothes, even in 30 degrees. But trust me, they're just fine. They are also anything but silent as they banter about recent chit-chat and the fact that the weather is yet again impeccably hot today. If you haven't heard of the Taiwanese trash car, go Google it. It's beautiful. The funny thing about living in Taiwan is you come to Taiwan as a Westerner and you're barely wearing anything. By that, I mean all of the exchange students that, for instance, came from France to my campus every year. They would come dressed in teeny tiny little dresses and they would show their bellies, or they would almost walk around in bikinis because our campus was also right next to the beach. So they would be looking as if they were on a beach holiday as they were on the campus. That is a questionable thing to do, I think there should be some cultural respect towards the people on your campus, and you should be respecting the fact that this culture is not a bikini culture. But nevertheless, like what I experienced in most people is you start wearing more and more clothing as you stay in Taiwan. You start to really cover yourself up. And the funny thing is, I even did that, even though my biggest goal is to get tanned. Like my biggest thing was to catch enough sun so I wouldn't burn instantly, because what happens when you go in the sun is that you will be shrimped. I call it shrimped because I look like a shrimp, the color of a freshly boiled lobster, right after I've left my house. 15 minutes in the sun on a regular day in April will kill me. I'm not joking. And that is because of the extreme light and the angle of the sun and the humidity and all of it. You will just fry yourself. So my goal was always to get tanned in advance, or slowly tan, so I wouldn't get fried later on. And the second year, I really achieved that goal. But even though I was trying to tan, I was still making sure that I would, for instance, cover my shoulders up and make sure that, I had something to cover most parts of my body. Like I would, for instance, love wearing long and flowy skirts because they would get rid of the sun problem. However, they still have the, flow and airiness. Long story short, these elderly ladies who are covered up are also mirrored in younger ladies who are all covered up. And that again leads to foreigners who, as they live in Taiwan, learn to also cover themselves up. As everyone between 20 and 60 passes the hours at their desks, the old ladies are getting ready for a highlight of their day after lunchtime. A practice that will not stop until these golden girls and gentlemen make a not so early return to their beds. Joint exercise. This is something that no one ever told me about before arriving, and it makes me smile and curse every time I see it. Anywhere from 3 p.m. in the afternoon, whole parks are brimming with flocks of elderly ladies and their very unmotivated spouses. Sometimes, some spouses are very motivated, who perform awkward poses and motions. Oftentimes, according to one alpha oldie, who screams poses and numbers through a megaphone. Mostly, these exercises range from stretching to tai chi. In even the late night hours, even mild to intense dance classes are taking place. Generally, they are free and organized by someone who supposedly knows what they're doing, who is commonly identifiable by a squeaky old microphone. The affinity of Taiwanese and microphones, by the way, is a whole other story. If there is one way in which Taiwan tortures me, it is the excessive use of microphones. So if you imagine yourself going to a park, lying on a bench under palm trees, as they sway in the wind with a book in hand, you're in for a surprise. If you add sweat, screaming ladies, and constant counting in Chinese to the mix, you're closer to the truth. In order to ensure that there always is some sort of strain on your ears, elderly ladies have invented an array of different methods. Not only can the mic be attached to a human, but it might also just magnify the replay from a phone. Some bring an actual ghetto blaster on wheels to the park. I wish I were joking. And my personal favorite is the method of tying a megaphone with a recording of a lady counting up and down in Chinese to a tree and then just letting it do its thing. 4 hours. Coffee and pee. This is my favorite chapter. In an attempt to flee and actually focus, you might find yourself in a nearby cafe. This is one of my favorite places because the voices mixing here are generally more subdued. The music is jazz, and there's expensive yet very good coffee. It's not just jazz. I would also highly, highly recommend the really small niche cafes that have like almost a rugged, dirty type of look to them, or like a less orchestrated, beautiful look. Those ones are usually playing Taiwanese songs, Taiwanese music, which I really love. They also have a special vibe because it's more about, some of them are like hubs of Taiwanese independence, old artifacts. Sometimes they're run by collector type of people who either collect records or they collect Taiwanese independence flags. I've seen one that does that. They're really special places. I highly, highly recommend the coffee culture in Taiwan. As mentioned previously, Taiwan is perfecting its coffee art, since this is also a place where coffee beans can actually be grown. To a European conception of coffee, such a thing is mind-bending. The most appreciated kind of coffee at the moment is hand-poured or drip coffee, which is why most reputable cafes will offer a page of single origin coffees or house blends, either iced or hot. Some people argue that cafe owners in Taiwan are overdoing it and selling a show rather than the taste, but I personally disagree. The thing about Taiwanese cafes is you will walk in and these people will be working in an almost laboratory setting with huge glass vessels. And yes, I'm not sure how much of that is necessary to really improve the taste. I feel like it's an experience, and I think it definitely, no matter if it really improves the taste that much, it is worth the experience. Though it is certainly a matter of choice whether you like drip coffee or not, many cafe owners will offer you tastes of different coffees, which allows you to actually develop an understanding of the different tastes and different kinds. Taitung is a really good place if you enjoy the whole experience of coffee, because there's some owners of cafes there actually grow the beans, meaning you don't just get a cafe that roasts the beans themselves. These cafes will actually have grown the beans, harvested the beans, and the same person will have roasted and finally made the coffee for you. I found a really small cafe at a bus stop when I was traveling through Taitung, and it was beautiful. He took such care of his beans and he showed me the whole process. And he was so proud of the bags that he sold of the freshly roasted coffee. So if you're really into coffee and you want to get something very special to take home as well, I would highly, highly recommend going to Taitung, because that's where you will find people who actually grow beans, roast beans, and make coffee for you. One thing that doesn't quite convince me in Taiwan is sweet treats. Most are European imports, and don't be fooled if something here is referred to as bread. It is not bread. Actually, it's all very sweet, unfurnished cake. Keep in mind, I come from Austria. Austria is one of the capitals in Europe, I would argue, of sweet treats, baked goods, and like cakes. And we also have a heavily bread reliant culture. Austria is also, like Germany, I guess, known for good bread. So when Taiwan labels something bread, our understandings of bread just don't align. Generally, thanks to the vast availability of natural and scientific sweeteners, Taiwan is under an epidemic of sweetness. Don't ever order something with 100% sweetness, especially at tea stores, unless you intend to test your insulin production. There is a reason the levels of sugar here are to be adapted. Yes, you will probably be buying some type of bubble tea when you are in Taiwan, and the worst thing you can do to yourself is to ask for 100% sugar. You can also go and get a diabetes test in advance, because that's how it's going to work for you. You will not put that cup down and feel normal. And as a matter of fact, if you travel in Taiwan, you will find that up north, things are less sweet than in the south. If you go to the same place, the same drink shop in the south, in Kaohsiung, and then you go to the same place in Taipei, you might find that their stuff actually tastes different. And I think that's a common thing for Taiwanese to say, is like, Southerners really like sweet things. However, I cannot recommend visiting Taiwanese cafes enough, as I find they have their own sort of appeal. I've already written about it previously, and I will definitely write another article only dedicated to the special art of Taiwanese cafes. But interestingly, these hip hangouts are often owned by young bosses, or laobans. Laoban is the name of anybody who owns a store. Not the person who's at the counter. unless the person at the counter also owns the store. So in a night market, you would call the people who are selling the stuff 老板, because that's the people who probably own that place. The word of mouth often suggests that these men and women only open stores for fun as they are rich enough to play with life. Though this is certainly not a general rule or general truth, gossiping with the bosses and having an intimate conversation is a very common thing in Taiwan in these mini cafes, of which some are so small that it really seems completely unrealistic to expect any income from them. But they are fun and creative nonetheless. The logical consequence of coffee is the need to visit the toilet. As you approach, you might be greeted by a distinct smell of urine, which is typical of countries with hot and humid climates. As you enter, be sure to grab some toilet paper, if it is on the way in, because this country has not yet deemed paper in every stall a basic human right. As ironic as I'm trying to put this, in all honesty, I'm suffering. When I arrived in Taiwan, it took me a hot minute to realize that I had to pick up toilet paper on the way in if they have it hanging on the way in. Mostly they don't have it inside the stalls unless you're inside a subway. The best practice is to bring some tissues. Afterwards, you will likely not find yourself placing your butt on a comfy seat, but rather hovering in a lack of balance over an oval hole on the floor. One more speciality of Taiwan is a hole in the floor toilet, which is something I would advise people to be prepared for. Yes, all public toilets are free and extremely clean, but be mindful that this doesn't necessarily guarantee seated comfort. On the way out, as you wash your hands because you're a good and clean human, you will likely find either a lack of soap or paper. Likely both. Especially paper to dry your hands is mostly not provided, so either you bring a little hanky to dry your hands or you just dry them on your pants. Trust me, any watermarks will disappear quickly in the hot weather outside anyway. Or they are replaced by sweat marks. It really just depends on you. Humanimals. As the sun paces down the last few meters on the horizon, the park gets notably more active. Students sit in groups at the coffee tables to do their homework or prepare for after-school classes. Most students here are busy in different educational institutions until late at night, sometimes 10 p.m. if they intend to finish high school. Yet one more reason why I disagree with how children are treated in Taiwan. Education is good. Great, it is being valued, but a childhood is better. The smaller children pace around the park on their giddy little legs on mini bicycles, mostly accompanied by their grandparents. The later the day, the higher the likelihood that their actual parents will be off work and thus able to watch their offspring. Far more likely than sighting a parent with their child is to find an owner with a dog. Statistically speaking, the number of registered dogs in Taiwanese households has already exceeded the number of children, and thus this description is very accurate and likely. Dogs, as opposed to kids who are born and shaped to fit the relentless flood of standardized tests, come in all shapes and forms. Fat, small, fidgety, sporty, black, short-furred, squeaky, straight-up dumb-looking, but mostly not what dogs look like in Europe, like animals. It is abundantly obvious that dogs are the replacement for children in so many ways. They wear awkward dresses, get the freedom children are never granted by letting them roam freely without leashes, and have their asses wiped intricately and sometimes overly passionately by their owners. On the other hand, publicly breastfeeding a little human is not so common in Taiwan. I wonder where this mismatch is coming from. Also be prepared that dogs are not the only animals that the Taiwanese treat as pets. There really is absolutely no limit as to what you can treat as a pet in Taiwan. It seems that as long as you can put a diaper on it, it will pass as a new family member. I've seen rabbits, ferrets, meerkats, and real cats. There were lizards, big and small turtles, parrots, ducks, and smaller multicolored birds, which I don't have proper wording for because all of these different types of birds I don't even know. I've also seen owls, by the way. And yes, there actually are diapers for parrots and ducks on sale. So if there's one thing that I really recommend doing when you are in Taiwan and you have a bit of time on your hands, sit down at the park and watch people with their animals. It is truly mesmerizing to a European, I would say. Also, I've learned that the white butt of a duck requires a little dip in a plastic bag filled with water for it to stay pristinely white after taking a shit in said diaper. My favorite thus far was a mini turtle on a string with a kitchen supply rubber band around its shell, joyfully dangling its legs in the air as its owner waited for the bus. Trust me, there really is no end to the joy of watching the lengths that Taiwanese will go to humanify creatures you would have otherwise labeled animals. Even grandparents are happily watching their grand animals rather than their grandkids. As long as they go to banter with each other and perform awkwardly synchronized dances, the world seems to be in order for them. Yet I cannot help but notice the look of success on the face of those grandpas and grandmas who get to walk their actual grandkids. Time to say goodbye. 10 p.m. is typically when things start to quiet down, at least according to common law. Until about this time, there will be groups of students dancing in front of large public mirrors, practicing K-pop dances with and without music. Interestingly, in this regard, the young and the old are quite alike. Dancing is somehow, interestingly and awkwardly, important. As the cafe is getting cleaned, the last cups are returned and the screaming from speakers subsides, leaving grannies and grandpas alike in a lack of further engagement by public karaoke or movement, the park becomes quieter. A little at least. The traffic is still roaring and it will never stop. And that is when I will swing my delicate behind on a U-bike, the public rental bike of choice all across Taiwan, and make my slow but passionate ride home. As I try to sync my pedaling to the rhythm of the traffic around me in an awkward attempt not to be run over by X number of way too old to drive individuals, I once again ask myself, do I stay or do I go? Because no matter how peculiarly beautiful this place is, I don't yet seem to know whether it is the best place for me. But one thing is for sure, a part of my heart will always stay on this beautiful, whimsical island of Taiwan. That is it for the reading. I think for this episode, I gave a lot of background because, again, it's a topic that is very dear to my heart. It's something that I have actually a lot of experience about. There is such an abundance of stories to tell that I have collected across the last 2 years. I really cannot recommend going to Taiwan enough. It is such a crazy experience, such an out of this world experience to immerse yourself in this culture and to learn about the people. I will say it again and again, and I think anybody who's been to Taiwan will completely agree. The best thing about Taiwan, no matter how beautiful it is, are the people. I describe them as whimsical beings who are following their own type of rhythm in this article today, but if you live in Taiwan and you have like the smallest capability to speak Chinese, people will be so happy to talk to you and people will invite you and people will literally have the cutest little chats with you on the side of the street. I need to write so many more articles about all of the people and personalities that I've met because they are so precious. They truly give me hope in humanity. It's funny how sometimes people are saying like they're losing hope in humanity, they're losing hope in the world because of everything that's going on, or they're losing hope in common human sense. Living in Taiwan really proved to me through the people that that's not true. There's so many good souls and there's so many good people to meet, so many stories to be told, so many small moments to be enjoyed, so many memories to be made. If you have lost hope in humanity, get on an airplane, preferably by China Airlines, and go to Taiwan. Thanks for granting me access to your ears on the Mugcast. You can read more of my work on Medium at huginamug, or follow me on Instagram via the handle hugin.amug for cozy content and updates. Don't forget to follow the podcast and share it with a fellow coffee lover and tell me which article I should read next in the comments. I hope you had a nice cappuccino with this article, and I send a warm hug from my mug to yours. Bye-bye!